What's up guys, it's Z here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day. Today we're updating the Lightsworn deck. This is a deck that I just keep coming back to whenever I just feel like having a little bit of fun with more of a casual deck, because the nature of the deck is just this coin flippy strategy that a lot of people enjoy. This deck has had a huge fan base ever since it was released like so many years ago, and I think it has aged really well because of all the chaos and all the support cards that it has gotten throughout the years. So this is why I've been trying to tweak it. I'm trying to make the deck as consistent as possible, because if you rely on a deck like this in order to be able to win most games, you need to be able to make it as consistent as possible to minimize the amount of decks that you rely purely on luck to win. But of course, this deck is so fun just because of this luck-based strategy. So yeah, this is the deck that I've come up with. If you have any other ideas with cards that you've been testing that have been working really well for you for Lightsworns, please comment down below. I am trying to make the deck as good as possible in order to be able to compete. So yeah, do that. And before we begin, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content. And now, let's get to the deck profile. So starting off with the Lightsworns, we have of course 3 copies of Raiden. I mean, of course, ever since we got it in the structure deck, this card has been such a good card for the deck. It's the only Lightsworn monster that you can effectively mill cards during your own turn because of its effect, just mill 2, and during the end phase you mill 2 more. Usually the Lightsworn monsters just mill during the end phase, which doesn't give you a lot during this type of meta because you cannot really wait for a next turn in order to set up cards during the first turn. You absolutely need to make the best board possible in order to make sure that your opponent doesn't kill you during the next turn, and cards like Raiden just help you do that. And of course, it's a level 4 tuner, you absolutely have to max out. Such a great card. 3 copies of Lumina. Lumina is the best one out of the old ones, and her effect being able to just basically use her as long as you have cards to discard. That's the limit of how many times you can use this card, and especially with cards that we've gotten in Toon Chaos, being able to banish cards and then get them back from the banish zone, and her being level 3 for Levier means that you can infinitely use her effect. As long as you have cards to discard, you can keep using her effect, so this is why this card is really good, and the amount of monsters you can summon is basically limited to exactly how many good meals you're going to get and how many cards you have in your hand. 3 copies of Wolf. Unfortunately, you still have to max out on Wolf because even though it's a break, it's still a card that you need to be able to mill so you can get the most free advantage. It's a level 4, so it's a level 4 special that you can get to Minerva, and you're trying to get to Minerva as quickly as possible so you can get even more cards, potentially even more draws, because more cards in your hand in this deck means more Lumina resolutions, so yeah. And of course, even though this card is a bit tricky in the hand, aside from Solar Recharge, there are other cards right now that you can use in order to be able to discard it, so it's not even that bad drawing right now compared to what it used to be back in the day. So yeah, it's not that bad drawing, but of course it's a card you absolutely want to mill to get the most value out, and it feels so rewarding when you actually mill Wolf. So yeah, you cannot even imagine how good it feels unless you have actually played this deck. For the one-offs, play 1 copy of Felice. Felice is just a worse copy of Wolf because unfortunately she only gets her effect to special herself once she's milled by a monster effect. If she was like Wolf and you could mill her with a recharge and charge and get her on the field, that would have been so amazing. It would definitely be a 3-off on top of having 3 Wolf, but unfortunately just 1 I think is perfectly fine. She has an effect that you can tribute her to pop a monster and then mill 3 cards. It doesn't come up too often, but it's something to keep in mind just in case you actually mill this one-off, so it can come up sometimes. 1 copy of Lila. You only play 1 because there are matchups like Drytron where this card would be completely dead. Her effect would not come up because they don't play any back row, so she's here just as a card you can search with your Solar Recharge and your Charge of the Light Brigade, so you can potentially draw into it or search into it and then pop cards like Revolt or bait them, and then she's a level 4, so after you've used her effect you can use her for Minerva. It's a decent card, but I wouldn't play more than 1. 1 copy of Little Minerva, just another name for Judgment Dragon because she gives you another mill, and she's not the worst card ever. She can give you some good synchro plays with your level 4 monster, so she's a decent card. When you're playing a deck like this and you want to base around JD, because there are builds out there that don't rely on JD, but I feel like if I'm playing Lightsworn, I just want to win games with Judgment Dragon. I don't really feel like playing it without it, so this is why I'm trying to get in the deck as many names as possible so I can summon it as consistently as possible. And the best one of the Lightsworns is, of course, the Twilightsworn Lumina. Being able to use these effects like multiple times and get so many monsters on the field is so good, because with Chaos Creator you can banish all those monsters and get them back from your banish zone to the field. It's so amazing. You can get so many monsters. You can end on Appaloosa very easily in the deck, and then you can keep doing even more and more and more, so you can basically get a board that your opponent is not going to be able to deal with. And the amount of follow-up this deck has with so many boss monsters is just insane. You can basically kill your opponent in 1 turn very easily. And speaking of the boss monsters, the first one is 3 copies of Judgment Dragon. Of course, if you want to play Lightsworns, I feel like you have to play this card. Of course, that's a lie. You don't have to play it, but come on, can you imagine a Lightsworn deck without Judgment Dragon? I don't feel like this is a Lightsworn deck. This is such a cool monster that has been a really good powerhouse ever since it was released. It was at 1 at some point, and it's still a broken card. An effect like this is timeless. It's always going to be good, so this is why this card is really good. And we also have a way to search it these days, which makes it even better than it used to be. So this is why I think this card is absolutely broken, and you have to play as many good names as you can in the deck in order to make this as consistent as possible. 2 copies of Levy here. Levy is just a broken card and feel like you have to be able to play it, and you don't really need to max it out because you have a lot of ways to search whenever you need. And the problem with Levy is that it needs you something in the graveyard that contradicts with Judgment Dragon, so sometimes you don't really want to banish, so this is why you don't want to see it in your hand unless you absolutely have the strategy to go. And it's basically a much better going second card than going first in this particular build, because when you're going first, what you're trying to do with this card most of the time is to shuffle a card of your opponent's hand back into the deck, but the majority of monsters in this deck are light, so it's not like you will ever have 3 darks to banish consistently in the graveyard. So yeah, this is why I think this card is a much better going second card, still a really good card, and it's a monster that you can search, so there's that too. And another searchable target is the Chaos Emperor Dragon of Armageddon. This card, I think, is a great one of, if you don't think that this card is good and you want to be more OG and play the OG Chaos Emperor Dragon, you can do that, because I feel like there are some scenarios where searching this Chaos Emperor Dragon, of course you cannot summon it during your own turn because of the errata, but keeping it in your hand would be such a threat to your opponent. But I feel like this card is just has much better synergy being able to use the banish zone. So yeah, this is why I really like this card. And the last boss monster is 2 copies of Chaos Creator. This is like such a good chaos monster that we haven't received like in such a long time. This card just makes a huge difference. If you've played the deck with it, you see how broken this card is. Being able to use Lumina's and Lightsworn Lumina's effect over and over again, being able to banish them and then get them back is just insane. What this card does is that it's basically a chaos monster. You banish a light and a dark to summon it, and then if you control this card, then you can target 3 banished monsters with different names, you summon one of them, and the other go into the bottom of the deck. So basically what you're trying to do with this card is get your Luminas back on the field as many times as possible so you can use them effect over and over again. Usually you're going to end with an empty hand, but you have so much on the board that is just very easy to destroy your opponent during the next turn. Now I do play some engine cards, so the first one is 3 copies of Starlight Seyfert. So on top of having good normal summons out of the Lightsworn deck, this is a 50 card deck. So when you're playing 50 cards, having like 3 Raidens and 3 Luminas are not enough normal summons, even if you count the charges so you can search them. So I feel like a powerhouse normal summon like Starlight in a Chaos deck gives you so much more, because sometimes going for the Lightsworn plays early might rely on you milling good in order to do more, but this card on its own just gives you Heavenly Spheres on the field, which is a decent interruption, and it gives you a lot of monsters in the graveyard for your Chaos cards. So this is why I think this is such a good normal summon, and you absolutely need to play it. And of course, if this card is good for going for the level 4 Chaos Dragons, it can also search more stuff because it doesn't restrict you to searching level 4s. It can also search level 8 monsters. So yeah, this card is really good and is really good at recycling cards back. Of course, we have the Chaos Dragons, we have 1 Collapse Serpent, 1 Verbuster. I mean, you need to play these too. They're at 1, but even if they're at 1, it doesn't really matter because of Chaos Space. You can just loop them back from the banish zone from the graveyard into the deck with Chaos Space, and then you can keep searching them and use them again. So as long as you keep milling Chaos Spaces, you're going to be able to use this infinitely, and this is way better than the Dragon Link deck, because in the Dragon Link deck, once you use Chaos Space, the only way to get another one to the grave is resolving it again, but in this deck, you just can mill all the copies of Chaos Space, so even if you don't even resolve it once, you can still use its grave effect to draw cards and put this back into the deck so you can keep using them, and this is why I think this engine is just so good in this deck. We play 1 copy of Chaos Valkyria, just another level 4 monster you can special summon that is searchable with Chaos Space. You need to get to Minerva as fast as possible, so this is why you need to play this 1 copy. You have so many good cards that you can splash into the deck because of those Chaos cards that you can just have so many options available to you. I also play the Clown engine. I play 3 copies of Damage Juggler, 1 copy of Trick Clown, and 1 copy of Hat Tricker. Now, the reason I'm going with 3 copies of Damage Juggler is because it's the one you want to mill, and even if you draw it, you can discard it with cards with like Chaos Space and another card I'm going to show you, so you don't really mind. This is why Wolf is not a bad card to draw, because there are cards that need you to discard. So this is why it's another card that replaces itself when you discard it, because if you discard Trick Clown, yes, it gets on the field, but the problem is that you only used 1 resource. But if you discard Damage Juggler, then you can search your Trick Clown, and then you can discard your Trick Clown and then get to the field. So it basically gives you 1 more card in the rotation. And of course, Hat Tricker is a monster that you can special summon because it's very easy to get 2 monsters on the field without even relying on your opponent. So yeah, I really like this ratio. 2 copies of Malicious. Malicious is just link fodder in this deck most of the time. You can use it for synchros. I do play 1 more monster that allows you to use this card to synchro summon, but most of the time it's just a monster that the moment it hits the graveyard, either you discarding it or milling it, you want to use its effect immediately just so you don't risk getting the other copy into the grave and basically becomes dead like that. So yeah, it's another good card that if you're playing any kind of mill deck, it used to be good in Burning Abyss too, so it's a decent plus card you can play in a deck like this. And even if you're playing something else that doesn't rely on you having to mill it, I think Malicious is a great card, because if you're playing a deck like this, I feel like you have to rely on getting lucky sometimes, and this is one of those cards that can reward you for getting lucky, and it's not really bad even if you draw it because you have ways to discard it, so it's just a free monster on the field. And the last monster is one copy of Plague Spirit the Zombie, because of course we play Needle Fiber, and it's the best monster you can summon if you don't want to summon anything particular. Of course, having the little Minerva being a spellcaster you can get with Needle Fiber means that you can also play the Selene Access Code combo, which is really good, but most of the time if you're not going for that, you want to be summoning your Plague Spitter, and this is why I said with combination of Malicious you can go into level 8 Synchros, and there are some really good level 8 Synchros, particularly one right now that helps Chaos decks like nothing has ever helped them before. For the spell cards, we have 3 copies of Charge. Of course, you need to play 3, same thing with 3 copies of Solar Recharge. I don't think there's anything to discuss about these cards. You mill, you draw, you search whatever you want, they're just mandatory in a deck like this. 3 copies of Chaos Space. This card has so many options in a deck like this. If you want, you can search the level 4 dragons and go for a Heavenly Spheres or rank for plays. If you want, you can search your boss monsters like your Chaos Creator, all that stuff. It's such a good card, I think. You have to absolutely max it out. A card that some people don't really like playing in the deck, but I have found that I really like is 3 copies of Melody the Awakening Dragon. The reason I like this card is because it gives you the option to get rid of cards from your hand like Damage Juggler and Wolf that you want in the grave, either for their effects or being names in the graveyard for Judgment Dragon, and it helps you search both your Levianir and your Chaos Emperor Dragon of Armageddon at the same time, so especially going second, this gives you so much more, and it's a 50 card deck, so it's not like you're going to draw multiple copies of 3-ofs consistently, so it's not like playing less than 3 is good because you just want to see 1 because you play 50 cards, so this is why I think this card is really good. Of course it's cuttable and you can play something else, it's not the most important card in the deck, I've just been really enjoying it and seeing really good success with it. And for the one-offs, have 1 copy of Monster Reborn. It's another way to reuse your Lumina if you mill it, so it's a really good card. Foolish Burial, you'd have so many cards that you want in the grave. Worst case scenario, it's just another level 4 on the field with Wolf to go for Minerva. And 1 Call by the Grave, because there are some hand traps that absolutely kill this deck. Cards like Lancia and Droll, you do search and you do banish a lot, so even though you might not lose to a single Ash or a Veiler, cards like these do hurt a lot, so just playing this 1 copy might mean that you might win more games than you wouldn't, because you're going to draw this eventually some games, and if your opponent has one of those hand traps, especially games 2 and 3, then you can still win by negating cards like that. For the extra deck, we have 2 copies of Minerva. I really like playing 2. I feel like if you're playing just 1, then you're limiting yourself a lot, just because your opponent might destroy it, because it's not as threatening as it used to be. Your opponent was like, didn't want to destroy it because of the second effect, but right now, a lot of people, by the time they can destroy her, they already have a way to negate her effect, so it's not like she's going to stick in the field to use her second material to mill again, so you have to make a second one. And with Zeus, it's being a card, being able to summon this and run over something means that you can get an insane monster on the field that will have the effect to board wipe everything. And because Xyz monsters, aside from Minerva, are not the best to play in this deck, I feel like it's the only way that you can get some advantage on top of summoning Zeus afterwards, because if you wanted, you can play something like a Heartland Draco if you want to rely on Zeus, but this card just gives you direct synergy with the deck on top of being able to go into Zeus. 1 copy of Levier. I think this is just another mandatory Xyz that you need to play in the deck, because the amount of times you can use Lumina with this card is absolutely insane, and of course it's another monster that if you manage to land an attack with, you can summon Zeus, so it has all the more reasons to play it, so yeah, this card is really good. And speaking of Zeus, you also play 1 copy of it. It's not mandatory if you don't have access to it and you don't really want to buy it right now and waiting for the reprint. It's not something that you absolutely have to play to win with a deck, but it's just another win condition that is such a broken card. As long as we have it and it doesn't get hit by the ban list, when we're going to use it in any deck that relies on Xyz monsters, so yeah, I think it's such a good card. For the Synchro monsters, for the level 7s, we play of course 1 Michael, being able to remove something on the field, really good. 1 copy of Dragster, in order to go for something going first, because it's the best level 7 Synchro monster you can summon going first. And the level 8 Synchros, of course, are the ones that are the absolute man stuff in this deck, both of them. The first one being the Chaos Ruler. This card, I mean, come on, if this card is good for Dragon Link, imagine what it can do for Lightsworns, because you get all the advantage out of the cards you mill. If you mill Wolves, then you can just summon them on the field and you search something as well, and when you use it to link summon, then you can just bring it back with also banishing monsters, so you can make your Chaos Creator live. This card is just a broken card in the deck. I prefer it over Savage, because the other level 8 Synchro monster I play is 1 copy of Omega, which is another card that helps you recycle stuff and keep using them again. Just imagining the fact that I chose those 2 over Savage in the deck means that these cards have so much utility, and I don't really need Savage because I do have other cards to be able to disrupt my opponent, so yeah, I really like playing these 2. For the Link monsters, we have 1 copy of Striker Dragon. Of course, this is here to go into the 1 copy of your Heavenly Spheres because of the Chaos Dragons. I feel like just making the most out of the worst hands that you can possibly draw is a really good indicator for going for a build, because if you just have nothing other than being able to go for one of your dragons like the Seyfert or a Chaos Space, you'd need to play this in your extra deck just to make sure that you have an interruption, even if the rest of your hand is absolutely unplayable. Let's say you draw like 3 Solar Recharges without any Lightsworns and you have a Chaos Space with maybe like a Damage Juggler, then being able to go into that is absolutely crucial, so I wouldn't play anything other less than this, because because if you're playing the Chaos Dragons in any type of deck, I would highly recommend playing these 2 cards in your extra deck. You're not going to regret it. They're really, really good, and it gives you also some sort of follow-up with 7 Heavenly Spheres effect from the summon from the deck. 1 copy of Needle Fiber. You usually are going to be summoning your Plague Spreader, but if you're going second, you're going to be summoning your Minerva because it's a light monster. No, it's a light monster for the Jet Dragon, a Lightsworn monster, and a Spellcaster because of Selene, so it does have a lot of uses. You don't really need to play something to use its secondary effect during your opponent's turn. You hardly ever keep this on the field. Usually you're going to link it off either for Selene to go into access code or for an Appaloosa going first, so it's never going to stick on the field. 1 copy of Phoenix. I don't play Unicorn. I don't think you need to link climb a lot in this deck to destroy stuff, because with cards like Judgment Dragon and with Levianeer, you have so many ways to clear boards, and the only reason this card is here is because maybe your opponent has a floodgate on the field that prevents you from playing, so you need to get rid of it first and then go for your rest delays. 1 copy of Selene. Like I said, with Little Minerva being a spellcaster, you can just summon this very easily and go into access code, and here's the 1 access code. This is another card that you don't really need in order to play this deck. Boral Sword can just replace this very, very easily. It just gives you the ability to summon it with Needle Fiber. Is so much easier than summoning a Boral Sword, which you actually need to summon all the monsters from your hand or your deck without even relying on 1 card. Of course, if you have access to access code, and then you need to play it in this deck and in pretty much any other deck instead of Boral Sword. But if you don't have it, don't sweat it. Boral Sword can work just like fine. And 1 copy of Appaloosa. Going first, she's the monster you're trying to aim for with 4 materials as quickly as possible, and then maybe you can get into some other stuff, maybe having a Minerva on the field or a Levier to go into your Zeus during the second turn. You're just trying to make your opponent's plays as weak as possible. You're not going to completely stop them with a deck like this unless you want to commit your entire strategy around building a board, but this is not how I wanted to play the deck. Of course, there are different builds, but still Appaloosa is a card that you have to play in any type of spammy deck just because it's free interruptions. So yep, that's the deck, guys. I think this is one of the most fun decks that you can play, and if you're a fan of the deck, I know that people have been experimenting so much with different kinds of builds, so I want you to tell me what other builds or what other decks you have been enjoying in the deck that have been working well for you. I just want to make the deck as good as possible. I know that a lot of people want the same, so let's have a discussion in the comments and see exactly what else we can come up with. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss upcoming content, and we'll see you next time.